Franz Matefi. Thoughts on our time. Literature, art in general, and philosophy as a barometer of society. The West claims the right to judge and thereby makes the world its victim. It lacks the discipline to restrain itself from judging others. It behaves like an immature child, one might think. But that would be a mistake. It's a material struggle to become richer than others. It is a victim of its own psychological weakness, which is why it cannot restrain itself. Due to his insatiability, he is unable to control his own behavior, both in the past and in the present. It leads a parasitic lifestyle, is unpredictable and therefore, in his perception, dangerous to the world. A spiritual resurrection can therefore only take place when the West becomes aware of its harmful behavior and finally learns to control itself in order to become itself again. A false mentality, harmful to humanity, has prevailed in the West for approximately 500 years. Physiocratic Europe slipped into the new world of the mercantilists, which was favorable for moneylenders and merchants. Work was no longer the morally justifiable and profitable, but became the key to unrestrained parasitism. Just consider the fortunes amassed by the banking houses of Fugger and Medici. Trade between the enslaved world and the Western flourished to the great benefit of the colonialists. In order to be equal to this new morality, in fact immorality, the only moral authority, the belief, the church, had to be undermined. When the Medici bought the papal throne, this hurdle was overcome.
The colonization of the world by the West, its unscrupulous exploitation, subjugation, and in some cases, enslavement, established the material and temporary global power of Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Great Britain. However, this colonial parasitism had negative consequences. Because enrichment was based not on its own resources but on plundered ones, the intellectual development of the West lagged behind its potential. In contrast, we consider the economic, intellectual and artistic development of non-colonial Germany in the 18th and 19th century. The role of Germany was comparable to that of Italy in the Middle Ages. Despite its small population, Hungary also played a significant role in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Problem-solving skills and the efficient use of limited resources and means fueled the spirit to create something extraordinary despite these constraints. Centuries of parasitic behavior culminated in the self-image of Westerners. This mentality, with its drive for expansion, is reflected in their sordid colonial history, which continues to this day. They continue to colonize the world, but with different means, namely, money.
When tolerance, wisdom, self-control and generosity are lacking, war is undoubtedly the most effective path to wealth. The sense of belonging to a community has become intertwined with the dysfunctional practice of self-enrichment at the expense of others, developing into a pattern of behavior. This poisoned society is driven by greed and insatiability. Under these circumstances, the only possible path to world peace for the West lies in finding its true self. Changing the world never begins with others, but with ourselves, in order to achieve self-knowledge. No one can change others, on the contrary, through imposed coercion, others are oppressed and ruined, while we ourselves become tyrants. The chosenness syndrome is the urge to bend and mold others to serve one's own purposes. It is a dysfunctional characteristic of the West. If we disregard previously known systemic concepts, common sense can envision a new existence that is unpoisoned by the present and the past, independent of the ideological actors of our time. If it were a foreign planet about which we know little, the planner could begin work on the future. Is this naivety? Isn't it the task of every poet, thinker, and philosopher to contemplate the nature of the future, the evolution of being? The past was unjust and the present still is, it's obvious to everyone. Isn't it time to bring light into this enforced darkness? Wouldn't it be the responsibility of every individual, of all of us? Aren't love, contentment, and reason enticing enough for us to address this topic?
When fear of any kind is eliminated from society, a new quality emerges, a new, better world. Is it conceivable to live in a world without fear and with differing opinions? Or is it even our duty to create this new world? The prerequisite for building such a world is the dismantling of prejudices against everything and everyone that has hitherto seemed or been perceived as hostile. Put more clearly, Only understanding and love can form the functional foundation of such a society. To achieve this, we would have to free ourselves from mental firewalls and forgive each other, otherwise we will continue marching down the path of injustice as before. Admittedly, not everyone is capable of letting go of their hatred. These can be ignored, in the hope that they will recognize and eventually acknowledge the new quality.
The increasingly prevalent, pandemic-like disease of our time is the polarizing evaluation of thought. The sometimes extreme, exaggerated contempt for dissenting opinions leads to the solemn crucifixion of thought, and not infrequently even of the thinker. Instead of the idea prompting reflection, the person is either effusively praised or deeply despised for their opinion. There is practically no place for middle ground in modern civilization, so the thinker is increasingly marginalized. What a shame that profound ideas from literary greats end up on the scrap heap of modernity. The contemporary thinker revels in the ostentatious glare of superficiality and dismisses the brilliant ideas of the greatest thinkers of the centuries with arrogant nonchalance. Why should we learn from others if we believe we are better, even the best? In our pride, we dethrone those who have not yet forgotten the art of thinking. Get rid of it. I don't care. Why should I be concerned with the profound thoughts of others if these can't be turned into money? The ideological antagonism, the hostility towards dissenters has escalated to the point of absurdity that quite a few people in Europe are suffering behind bars for their opinions, as the establishment's loyal lackeys, by law, show dissenters a red card.
With what convincing power of hypocrisy do the media report on the suppression of freedom of thought in distant countries, while remaining profoundly silent about the intellectual strangulation of dissenters in their own backyards? Human free will grants freedom of choice. However, when freedom of choice is restricted by imposed opinions, human free will is ultimately restricted. The imposed system arrogantly claims responsibility for the consciousness of its vassals, which in the long run leads to the degeneration of the mind. The individual can no longer independently distinguish between good and bad, moral and immoral, reasonable and pathological ideas. As long as a person lives on this earth, their development is an endless journey. Human development is inexhaustible. Ever-evolving consciousness continues to grow unabated as the mind is enriched by research. Yet at every stage of development, there are complacent individuals who seek to solidify their achievements. This is particularly true in philosophy. Those who have already reached the pinnacle of power strive to eliminate their competition and will do anything to maintain their dominance. In his unbridled determination, he is also capable of restricting intellectual development through self-made laws, even if this is ultimately futile. One of the most effective tools of despotic systems is to withdraw the frontline fighters of social development, traditionally the poets, from public view, to silence them, to expel them, or quite blatantly to imprison them with the help of fabricated laws.
And those who remain put on their grey proletarian clothes, their poetry becomes colourless monotony or entertainment and no longer contributes to the development of the mind. He demonstratively displays superficial ideas, meaningless appearances, and feigned importance. Consciously pursuing his own interests, he may refer to his origins, perhaps to provoke regret, or God forgive him, he may appeal to his false noble idealism, perhaps to his faith. But in any case, he presents his past as one of persecution and elevates it to an ethical dogma, even though he himself is a pillar of the army of hateful persecutors, who is only valued because he voluntarily and selfishly pushes the cart of the usurper of power. And it's only natural that awards are falling like thunderbolts. This deceitful, hypocritical spirit has spread internationally. The apparatchiks, who have reached the end of their minds, support each other by praising and honoring one another. A fundamental principle of classical literature, not popular fiction, is pedagogical eros, the winning of the soul so that the good, or at least what is perceived as good, may triumph. The poet, clinging to this ideal, wants to go further under the compulsion of his own spirituality and cannot be satisfied with the intellectual and spiritual level of his time. He selflessly strives for a higher level, even if it means sacrificing his financial interests and recognition.